Hello, everybody. We're here today with Annie Monaco and Tracy Malhaldo. I thank you all for being here. Annie has an amazing story of just this beautiful, healing and returning back to health after a crazy, crazy sickness. And I can't wait to start to hear the story, as I'm sure you are too. I'm just going to ask that we hold the questions till the end. Annie will let us know. If we need any clarification on something, you can just throw it in the chat or write it down so you remember the question towards the end. So with no further ado, Annie Monaco.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to share screen. I put together a PowerPoint. I figured that was the easiest way for me to just get across some things that I went through and make sure I covered everything. So when I was, I was like, I have to have a title for my workshop. And I was like, well, what is it that I'm trying to get across, right? So it's really what I've learned over many, many years is realizing the potential to heal within ourselves, right? And many people have said that phrase to me, and I really never bought into it. Took a lot of things, a lot of people, a lot of healers, lots of good friends just trying to help me understand that that was possible. So I think how I'll start this is really just telling you about my sickness, just so people understand what I went through. So, I want to acknowledge that it's really tough to be on a healing journey when you're sick and in pain. And you just have a lot of symptoms, and those symptoms are just constant reminders of being ill, right? So you're trying to stay positive, you're trying to stay on the right track, but when you have tons of pain and being ill, it's just easy and it's normal to be hopeless. And so it's hard to believe, when people are saying you can heal yourself, you have the ability. It's really hard to believe that we have those healing powers within. And so my medical story starts in 2016. I just started having really significant medical problems with all of my organs. So, of course, like everybody does when they're sick, they start going to the doctor. They go to many doctors, and I have seen many doctors in my lifetime. And it was about 18 months, and just different organs started to have problems. So my pancreas failed, and I have to take special pills for my pancreas. And then my liver started failing. And then I was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver and liver failure. And this was over, almost 2 years. And so every doctor I went to, just said, I don't know why this is happening, and couldn't really come up with a way to stop the progression of the failure. And so, as I'm on this journey of meeting with many doctors, many things are affected. And so, I run my own business. And so I do this with a couple of colleagues. And here I am trying to work and trying to manage life. And, my brain fluid levels are off. And so I remember this one time I drove somewhere, and I arrived at a building, and I looked at the building and I said, I don't know why I'm here. So that's how much my, fluids were off. And I just sat in the car, and I remember calling my husband saying, do you know why I'm here? I just remember this. And so he tells me, right? And somehow I go in the bathroom, I pull it together, I walk in, I do what I need to do for work, and I leave, right? But then I was like, my husband's like, you really can't drive. You don't know what's going on. You don't know where you're going, right? So it was moments like that. And again, you're trying to stay positive, you're trying to live your life, but it's really being affected by the medical stuff. And then I was in a lot of pain. This was probably, if I have, when I think back to my illness, I think back about the pain I was in. And if they say at a scale of 0 to 1 to 10, I'd say it would be a 20, right? And so, I wasn't understanding the medical system, and I would ask for pain medicine. And so, like many doctors, nobody wants to prescribe pain medicine because they feel like you're going to be an addict. And, here I am in horrific pain, right? So lots of challenges as I was sick. And so then in those 18 months, I had 8 hospital admissions, including 2 weeks at a liver clinic. I was in ICU for one of those weeks. And so where I went for specialists, how they do it is 8 liver specialists evaluate you. And then they come together as a team and they try to figure out what's going on with you. So after these 2 weeks, 8 doctors, and all the doctors come and meet with you, talk with you, do their tests. And they basically all looked at me and they said, we have no idea why you're sick. We have no idea why your liver is failing, right? So again, you're just trying to really stay positive, and these are the messages you're getting. And so, the surgeon said, you really need a liver transplant. And I remember my husband saying, but how do you know that the new liver won't have the same problem? And the doctor says, we don't know that won't be the case. And I'm like, but why would I go through a transplant and then I'm going to continue to be sick, right? So, and then they discharged me. They said, there's nothing we can do for you, and I'm 82 pounds at this point and I'm dying. And they're like, we don't know what to do. You're going to have to start looking for liver clinics around the country. And good luck with that. And it really was that. I remember the day we came home and I said, so who are we going to ask where to go? Right. And, you just start asking around and people start to really, give you suggestions. But before I go on, I want to tell one story, is because little moments of hope were happening. And so the main doctor said to me at Rochester, he said, you're getting very depressed. And I was a very aware person, right? I'm in a clinic with people who are, unconscious, out of it, there for alcoholism because, and their liver's failing, right? And he says, what do you need to help you? And I said, I need my dog to come here, right? So his residents, there was 8 residents around him, and they looked at him. They went like this to see what he'd say, because you can't have a dog in a hospital that's not trained. And he goes, let her dog in. Now, Renae knows my dog, and my dog to me is my soul dog, right? She just, was brought to me for the reason of many things. And so Greg walked in with her, the next day, and brought her up to the unit, and everybody knew that I was allowed to have the dog. She got right up. All the nurses came, and all they kept saying is, we've never seen this happen. He has never allowed anything like this, right? But those were moments. It was moments of peace and hope, and like you're getting messages, Annie, right? That's those moments I'd be like, I'm getting messages, right? So I'll go back to my power.
Annie, can I just ask one question?
Sure.
When they said, okay, well, we can't do anything for you, find other liver, was that because you said, no, I'm not going to do a liver transplant?
Oh, no, that wasn't it. It was because they wouldn't perform the surgery on me. I was too risky. So I had a previous car accident many, many years ago, and I had a previous abdominal surgery from the car accident. And they said I was too risky to do anything like that. So, that was why. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's just, I think doctors do the best they can, but, really this lack of coordination is obviously what many, many people feel when they're sick. So, this is truly how I felt. And I'm not afraid to say it anymore that, I was making plans of ways to die. I felt hopeless. And I actually asked a very good friend of mine who's a doctor, a surgeon, and I just said, you have to help me figure this out. I won't go, I don't want to live like this for another year, because, you don't really die. You really suffer a long time, and then it happens, right? So, I was going to suffer probably for another year before I passed away, right? So I was ready to go, and I just really wished I wasn't here. And I think, I think a lot of sick people feel that way, and they don't want to say it, because as soon as you say it, somebody goes, oh my gosh, don't say that, right? And of course, you don't want people to say that, but it really is what people feel inside. And so I somehow got to Cleveland Clinic. Somebody gave us a suggestion to go there. And I met an amazing man, amazing doctor, a surgeon. I just wanted to say Dr. Kareem is really a person who is more than just a doctor. He just said to me recently, I just had a visit with him, and he said to me, my purpose is to do the service of the Lord. Now, I've never had a doctor say that to me. I didn't even know anything about him like that. But he's the person that got Cleveland Clinic to put a clinic in Egypt. He's Egyptian. And so he runs the clinic in Egypt and he wants his poor country to be able to have access. So that's the kind of man he is. So he saw me. I was 82 pounds. I was malnourished. He looked at me and he goes, you're quite beautiful, right? Inappropriate for a doctor, but he was just trying to really engage me. And he looked at me and he goes, well, you know what? You might need my help or you could get better. And I told Renae, I said, that was the phrase. I looked at him like, oh, I could get better. Right? I didn't say it out loud, but I just remember thinking, no doctor ever tells you you're going to get better. Like nobody gives you hope, right? So he wouldn't let me leave the hospital. He said, I will absolutely not let you leave. You're malnourished. I can't do that. I'm hospitalizing you, right? And he put me on TPN. It's a food that's intravenous through a port. And my husband had to leave me there and go home because I had to stay for 5 days. So I didn't talk to anybody the entire 5 days. Everybody was texting, calling, and I refused. I was just so angry, right? Angry, but also in my head, repeating his words, you can get better. You can get better, right? And he'd come to see me, always very positive, right? So, it's hard to give up when others believe it's possible to get better. So, Renae, I know I was in contact with you a lot during this time. I had a beautiful yoga community at that point that really was just reaching out to me throughout these 18 months and just saying, but you can heal yourself, right? So, I'm grateful to all of those that just surrounded me with lots of love and kindness and understanding. And the belief that I could get better. But then I'd be like, but how is this possible? So in my mind, and I'll be very truthful, I was pretty sure Renae was going to heal me. So really, I would believe that if I just kept going to Renae, she was going to somehow do this, right? And Renae would say lots of things to me, but my brain only chose to hear certain things along the way. So it's a natural desire to say, I want Renae to heal me. I want Dr. Kareem to heal me, and to give them credit. Like, oh my God, I know this great healer. I know this great doctor, but that's not really how it works, right? It's really about people encouraging you to go within to find the ways to heal yourself. So, and it's scary because what if it's not true? What if it's not true that they can heal me? And what if it's not true that I can heal myself? So I tell about these two moments of divine intervention because remember, there's moments along the way that I keep getting messages. So I'm in a store, and for those that are local, I was in East Aurora at a place called Vidler's, and it's got lots of gadgets. I'm sure somebody took me there to cheer me up. And I remember staring at some kind of toy, and I just staring at it, but I was so sad. I just remember feeling that way. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this woman coming towards me, just glowing, right? And I'm like, who is this woman? And she puts her hand on my shoulder and she looks at me and she goes, it's going to be all right. You're going to get better. And she just walked away. And I was like, and of course, wouldn't I have walked after her going, who are you? And why would you say that? And you don't even know me, right? And I couldn't move. And she just disappeared in the store. But again, it was that moment that I'd be like, and then of course you tell somebody that story and they go, oh, that's nice, Annie. But I just was like, oh my God, right? And then there was another time I think we were in a hotel to go to Cleveland the next day or something like that. I can't quite remember, but I dreamed that angels were putting together toolboxes. And one of the angels told my husband that my toolbox was ready and he could bring it to me. And so I remember waking up and I woke up and Greg was sitting on a chair in some kind of weird room. I can't remember the room we were in. And next to him was this angel. And she, was quite large actually, black hair, and she's just smiling, beautiful wings. And I was like, oh, how nice. That's what of course you say things because you're in a dream state, right? And then I closed my eyes and I go, what did I just see? Right. And I looked, of course, there's no angel at that point, because you come into consciousness, right? So again, another moment, right? And I think as I talk about this, Renae, like I just want people to understand that those moments are very clear messages from the universe, right? And it's moments to say to you to stay on track, learn your lesson, understand why you're going through what you're going through. So I wanted to make sure people understood high vibration people. So that's, this is how I understand it. These are people who are radiating positive energy. They're in this great state of just joy and immense gratitude. They're people who live mindfully. They vibrate on a higher frequency, right? And so as I understood this, I was like, that's who I need to be around. Because when I would talk to Renae, or when I would go see, my acupuncturist, or when I'd go see my Ayurvedic person, any healer, I'd go to yoga, I'd feel great, right? And at that moment, I'm like, wow, I feel good. I'm going to get better. And then I understood, like, if you just stay among high vibration people, you're going to stay in high vibration, right? And so how do you then kind of push away people maybe that, not in a mean way, but push away people that are not in high vibration as you're trying to heal? And that was a really important piece to me. So, at the time before COVID, great, great yoga community, they would just come to my house. They would show up at my house. They would say, we're doing a meditation. They would visit, they would pray with me. They would sing with me. They would just do all these things. They would tell me, they'd pick me up to go to yoga. And, I'd go to yoga, but I couldn't even do poses, right? I would just lay there, maybe raise an arm or two, right? But I'm among high vibration people. And then I just, at my yoga community at that point had lots of like different workshops going on. So I just would show up and I'd sit there, and everybody knew what I was going through, right? And so, and this is really something, Renae, you taught me, is that my body needs to be reminded of what I desire, what I want, what I deserve, right? Because if I keep being, how do I say it? Like if I keep in a place of sickness, then my body goes, oh, you want more sickness, right? And so, just something that really, really came. So I don't want that life, but I want this life. So I remember thinking, I'd say out loud all the time, I'm not a liver transplant recipient. I don't know why I would say it, but there's nothing wrong with that, because many people get it and they live for many, many years. But I was like, but that's not my life. That's not what I want. I don't want to spend years going back and forth and getting things checked. I just didn't want that, right? So I got released from Cleveland Clinic. I was on a feeding tube. How exciting. And, my husband had to change this feeding tube every day, and I had to carry it on my back. And I had 60 days that I made a decision that in 60 days I was going to heal, because they were prepping me for the transplant. And so, that decision was not easy. But I said, you're making a choice, Annie, that you might try to end your life somehow. Why don't we try this for 60 days and see what happens? And I gave it my all. I did everything everybody recommended. If you told me to drink this juice, I drank the juice. If you told me to listen to this song, I listened to the song, because everything people were recommending was high vibration types of things, right? And so I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So these are my key decision points. So no talk of illness. Don't draw it towards you, right? And so this was huge because, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second, because I lost friends over this. I made a decision. You could not ask me how I was doing and when was the next medical test. Like, where are you? And everybody would be like, well, what happens next, right? And so I said to people, I'm not answering you anymore. We're not talking about my illness. And several people got very upset, and they chose to basically stop speaking to me. They're my friends again. But at that point they couldn't handle it, because they didn't understand what I needed. And I said, well, my request is you talk about things that we're going to do in the future. And so those that came on board, we did a lot of fun talking about the future, and a lot of things came true. So I'll talk about that in a second. So then it was visualizing the future self. So this was things like, Greg and I wanted to go to Italy. My parents are Italian. And at that point, we had an opportunity to go with friends who spoke Italian and go to, oh gosh, I can't even think of what the island is, to go to an island where there's black beaches, small communities, stay in a little villa and everything. So we would every day talk about how we were going to Italy, what we were going to eat, what we were going to do. And by the way, we did go to Italy to this with friends and things like that. If other friends came over, to help cook or clean or just help us in many ways. And they'd say, oh, we're going to go kayaking soon, right? We're going to go kayak. I love to kayak. So we're going to go kayaking or biking. Let's do a bike trip. And so then, of course, it's these high vibration conversations, right? We're like excited. We're talking. I'm feeling good. I could visualize it. I could see it. And it just became reality. And my Italian mom, for those who know Italians, it's always kind of a depression, right? And so I said to my mom, I go, you can't ask me how I am anymore, and you can't cry in front of me. And she goes, well, what do you want me to do in Italian? She's like, well, what do you want me to do then? And I go, you're going to talk to me about how you're going to teach me all the beautiful food you can and all the amazing things. And by the way, my mother and I have canned tomatoes since that time. Tomatoes, beets, lots of things. So she got into it. She's like, okay, I'm going to show you how to do the tomatoes and we're going to have a good time. She got into it, right? So the people that did this really got excited. And by the way, if you give people, the caregivers around you, something to do, they feel better. This is when caregivers pull away because they don't know what to do, because you're sad, you're depressed, and then they're like, oh, I can't hear that anymore, right? So if you give them a task or a job like, talk with me about the future, then they really are encouraging you and supporting you. So, all right, let's see. Okay, so other things I did during the 60 days. So healing songs, prayers, I'd go see healers. I drank good food, drinks, I would do juice shots. I would do all kinds of different, healing drinks, right? Whatever anybody said, I did, right? People would send me emails with different songs or like Pima Chodron or Tara Brach or Joe Dispenza, whatever it was, I listened to it. So it was about 6 hours a day that I was spending just in high vibration. So that could be I was meditating with somebody, like people would come over, we would meditate. One time Renae came over, there was a group of us who were sick. She did a 90-minute healing meditation. People would come and talk with me about future self. I would go to a breathing workshop. So it was 6 hours a day. So imagine 6 hours a day, you're kind of in bliss, right? I mean, the rest of the hours might be challenging, but 6 hours a day telling your body that you're healed is really an interesting concept. That's what I think. So then I would do these redirects, right? Well, and I have some examples of those coming up. And then, back to the high vibration. And then I'll talk about my high energy medical appointments. Okay, so don't ask me how I'm doing, right? So, I don't want to draw more sickness to me. I don't know if you remember this, Renae, but I was going to get infusions and they were 3-hour infusions. And I remember texting you and I said, I really like everybody here. They're so nice. They're so kind, right? I brought them a basket of flowers, cookies, or something to say thank you. And you wrote me and you said, you're too attached to these medical people. And you're drawing this towards you. And I remember leaving that day thinking, oh my gosh, she's right. I love coming here. I mean, these people treated me like gold, right? And it was the last time I went against my doctor's advice, right? I actually just never told them I stopped going. They just kept assuming I was going and I just never went back. And I was like, no, I don't need this. I want to attract other kinds of things, other kind of healing. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so meditation. So we'll talk a little bit about Dr. Joe's work. in a second. So, and by the way, I've been trying to meditate since I was 20, and I just really sucked at it. Can I use that word on podcast? So I just really didn't do well. I'd go to these week-long retreats, and 7 days not speaking to anybody, being quiet. You walk like a zombie, you're doing all these things, and it's like a stir crazy feeling, right? So I got a lot out of it. I understood the Buddhist concepts, taught me a lot, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just not a person that can meditate. Like, I try so hard. And that's when I really switched to meditations that people are talking. So, like, I've gotten a lot of different meditations from Renae. You put me to sleep last night, Renae. Like, I listened to something that, you talk for 30 minutes. I'm sleeping as I'm hearing it, right? And I realized that those are easier for me as a way to get more connected to universal energy. Okay. All right. So the future, right? The future. I said, yes, I'm going next exit. That's where I'm going. That's what I wanted, right? So here we are. We're talking about the future. People are really getting into it. They're just, and then one time, Greg, actually, my husband, actually, I couldn't really kayak, and he brought me to the kayak launch. He put our kayaks in the water. He picked me up, remember, I'm 82 pounds, and he picked me up and put me in the kayak, and he tied the kayak to his kayak, and we went kayaking, right? And again, my body, I was like, I deserve this. I deserve to be on this water. I deserve to be doing it. I mean, I could row a little bit, but it was like I was connecting to what I deserve, what is mine. And those were profound moments, right? Bike riding, I might be bike ride, down the street or something like that. I wouldn't go too far because, the chances of falling were great, but I was at least on a bike saying to my body, this is what I want. This is what I deserve. Okay. So Renae Masaccio's conscious redirects many times a day. I was up to about 200 times a day during the 60 days. So, you don't have a lot to do when you're sick, right? And you can't really work. So I would just walk around the house and say these things, we're in perfect health now. Thank you, it's done. Cancel. I replace all of this with love. Thank you, it's done. Replace all this fear with health and balance now. Thank you, it is done. I choose to remember my wholeness now. Thank you. So I have lots of these. I have, everything Renae texts or emails I just save, right? Because then I go back and I look at these things. So these were additional mantras, and these some were things people, hold on, I just want to make sure. Yeah. So, these were things that Renae would say or other people would say, and I would just say, I love my liver. My liver is working well. I'm worthy to receive. I let go what does not serve my highest good. Right. So again, if you're saying these things over and over, you're gonna be in a better place. Right. And I will be honest, everybody, doesn't mean outside of those 6 hours, I'd fall back into sadness and depression, but it was less. I was able to redirect myself to feeling positive. So, and I think that's an important piece, is that I don't want people to think that those 60 days I walked around in bliss. For many hours I did, but there were many hours, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was ill. I mean, you can't get away from that, right? When you're looking in the mirror and you're like, but it would be easier for me to get back to a place of feeling better, more positive.
Annie, can I just
Yeah,
ask
sure.
because I think this is important. You said you're looking at yourself in the mirror, and there's no getting away from what you look like and recognizing you're sick. When you were doing the conscious redirects, were you saying things in the mirror to yourself so that you could sort of make that change? I think that's so important.
Yeah. And I also wrote them on papers and put them places. So, not just the mirror, but different places in my bedroom or around the house, right? So that I, when I would look at something again, I might be sad, depressed, and I'd look at it, just again, trying to bring myself back to that. Yeah. Yeah, and I would look at my body in the mirror and I'd say, I deserve to be fatter. I deserve to be 100 pounds. And I would just say it over and over, right? Yeah. Okay, so hold on one second, this is blocking. Change your thoughts, change your life, 60,000 thoughts a day. Okay, so the whole future self concept, it's been introduced in lots of different ways to me. And so I remember my yoga instructor came to my house and said, um, you really you need to consider doing Dr. Joe's work, right? It's about the future self. So that's what I really embraced. He taught me what to do, and everything I said to you, I just kept talking about the future. But then, this really happened more towards I got better as I started to really look into Dr. Joe's work and trying to understand it better. So, this is some of his words. So I don't need to read all of it, but basically, you know, you're having the same thoughts every day. So if every day I say I'm sick, right? Then your body goes, oh, you're sick, right? So, if you say I'm well, then your body goes, oh, yeah, you're well, right? So, and also I really learned that the more negative thoughts I have, and I think everybody can agree with this, the more negative thoughts you have, the more challenging your day is, right? Like more bad things happen. And I can see it so clearly when I fall into that, right? And then when I'm positive and challenges happen, I remember, yesterday I was really on top of the world. I'm like, I'm so excited, I'm positive. And then something happened with my family, right? But I was handling it pretty well, right? I wasn't going to that place of like, oh my God, here we go, get right. Like I was like, no, I can handle this. This is just part of the journey of life, right? So if you have the same thoughts every day and you don't do anything to change that, then you're going to have the same experiences, the same emotions, right? So then it creates your personal reality. It creates who you are. So why not try something different, even if you don't believe it? So I wanted to just put things that I did during that time because I know people might be interested, right? Karen Drucker, I believe Renae was the one that turned me on to Karen Drucker, but she's an amazing singer, and I guess most of her songs are really for women. But I listen to her in the car. I just, they're heal, hold, and healthy. Um, Thank you for this day. I mean, she just has beautiful music that's very uplifting. So, I'm not a big music person. So, when I like somebody, then I just tend to stick with that. And then, just these are just different things. But, in our local community, if you're local, I've done sound baths, salt caves, crystal bowl healings. I've done different types of yoga. And then I also got into Qigong by Robert Pang. And this actually happened a little bit before I was not well. And so I went to a 7-day retreat with Robert in Costa Rica. And that was my first introduction to Qigong with him. And I've stayed with him, like we're doing his program all over again right now. And I love the movements, I love the pattern. But, after 20 minutes of doing his Qigong, I'm like, wow, I feel great. Right. And again, it's 20 minutes, and this is what I say to people, like doing just little things every day can really shift you. I do scents, I do diffusers, I do different things like that. I have a Tibetan bowl that I ring. I chant. So by the 60th day, I knew I was healed, right? So that's the crazy part. So that's where the story gets kind of interesting, is that I knew I was healed. And so before I go and finish that story, these were other types of treatments that I received. And again, this doesn't mean that this cured me, but the vibration of being with these people allowed my vibration to be higher and to really have not have, really connect with the ability to heal myself. And so, that's really, when I look back now, all these people were really trying to say to me, but you can do this, right? and I guess I should upload this PowerPoint. I'll have to give this to you, Renae. I just realized, I don't know if you can upload it with the Zoom meeting. So, and I want to talk a little bit about the anxiety because the anxiety of what is to come, the fear of what is going to happen, the dread, the hopelessness. If I don't want people to think that I wasn't anxious that whole time, other than close to the 60 days when I knew I was healed. But, intense anxiety. And what anxiety does is really what I believe is make you sicker, right? Because you're just consumed with fear and worry. So if you're doing lots of different positive things, the anxiety reduces. And I think that is easy concept, right? It makes sense to people. So I just tell people what I ate and drank, and a lot of this was based on what people told me to do. Beet juice is really good for your liver. So I was like, okay, I'm going to drink beet juice. And I canned beets with my mom. I canned 38 jars of beets this past summer. So I have lots of beets for my liver. Somebody told me to take wheatgrass shots. So I would go to take wheatgrass shots at our local juice place. I do bone broth. I do it every single day. I used to buy a product. Now I actually make my own bone broth. I get bones and I put them in a pot and I make my own bone broth. Mushrooms, I eat mushrooms pretty much every day. I have mushroom drops that I use. And again, that's just based on things people have taught me about mushrooms. I think we all know about this. What's it called now? Chaga? I don't take that, but I just eat mushrooms and I take drops. But so again, I just did things that people told me would be good for my liver. So medical appointments. Medical appointments are challenging, right? You walk in and you're being what I perceive as being manhandled, right? Like, give me your arm, I have to put something in it, right? And it was just awful experiences of just being touched, and then people were negative, and so I was like, how do I shift the energy with all these doctors and nurses and poking me? So as soon as somebody would come to get me from the waiting room, I'd say, oh, just so you know, I'm here for my facial and my body massage, right? And they would look at you, right? And then and then they'd laugh, right? And so then you're shifting the energy, you're shifting the vibration. And then I would make sure the doctor would know, because you see 10 people before the doctor. So sometimes they would say it. I just had to go get a test done. And a doctor walked in and he goes, I hear you're here for the body wrap treatment. Well, no problem. I got that covered. I'm just going to have you flip over as I do, right? And he went right along with it. And as I walked out, he goes, I wish every patient was like you, right? And so again, did I change the vibration at that moment, right? And of course, just so everybody knows, every test I take comes back negative, except, for back then it was just the liver, right? But it's interesting. So I think, that's a big piece of it, because I didn't want to start to dread medical appointments, because then you're just drawing more fear and anxiety, right? I don't want to be at a medical appointments. I don't want people taking more blood. I have lots of issues with blood being taken out. My veins collapse all the time, blah, 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 right? And so I was like, but how do I shift this? How do I change this? So another important moment is that I remember where I was. I was in the kitchen. And I was like, I was all alone, and I called Renae, and Renae, you were at a baseball game of one of your nieces or nephews. So, and she answered. And I just came right out and I said, am I going to die? Because, I know Renae for many years, and I'm pretty sure she's going to tell me the truth. And she paused, and I was like, oh shit, that's not good. I swore again. Sorry, Renae. And she goes, oh, well, if you were going to die, I'd lead you to the light. And she stopped again, and she goes, well, they're saying that it's about lessons you have to learn, and once you do, you will get better. And she's like, I gotta go because I'm at a baseball game. And so we hang up, and I'm like, but who the hell is they? Right? And lessons, but what lesson do I have to learn? Right? But again, it was this moment that I was like, Renae would tell me. Renae would absolutely tell me if it was my time. And I was like, it's not my time. And then you got to, of course, figure out what the lessons are. So right? So, I want to say something about that because it's hard to understand how you contribute to what goes on with your brain and your body. And did I cause this? And that, this isn't the time to feel guilt. This isn't the time to feel like you did bring this on. It's an opportunity, and I use that word strongly. It's an opportunity to really say, what do I need to learn here? What's the message, right? So, and what can I do to contribute to my health getting better? So I think we all can get it. Like if you eat bad food every day, I think we all know if I eat McDonald's every day, then I'm going to be eventually get an illness, right? I mean, I think we understand that concept, right? So if my thoughts are like going to McDonald's, if it's negative thoughts every day, then wouldn't it make sense that negative things might happen in my body? So if I change how I think, could that contribute to me being better, right? So me going through that, I would say absolutely. I understand it completely. And there were lessons in there. There was lessons of strong emotions that I was having about certain situations and how was I going to shift that? How was I going to change that? So to me, illness is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call to change your thoughts, to change your emotional state, and to understand if there's lessons to be learned, right? So that's how I perceive it, right? That's how I perceived what I went through. So I said after the 60 days, I knew I was healed. So we were approaching the 60 days and I had to go back to Cleveland Clinic to see the doctor. And, my husband, rightly so, was anxious, not knowing what was going to be said. Was he leaving me there to start the transplant? All of those kinds of things, right? So the days before, I started to say to my husband, I just want you to know I'm healed. And so, I'm going to just stop for a second. So he's an engineer. So you can't say things like that unless there's a medical test that says you're healed, right? So, I would say I'm healed and he'd go, that's really nice. Right? But he didn't believe me, right? But I just knew. And there was nothing about me that had any fear or anxiety. It's an amazing time. And I'm always trying to get back to that place of just feeling that way every moment, right? That you just know something. So I tell him on the way down to Cleveland, it's a 3-hour drive. I tell him again. I tell him that the messages have been given to me that I'm okay. He's being kind, polite, right? And so the morning of the visit, I say to him, we're going to walk in the office. Dr. Kareem is going to tell me how beautiful I am. And then he's going to tell me that I no longer need a liver transplant and my body is okay and I can leave and I don't need to come back. I should come back maybe once a year to see him. So I say all of this, right? Okay. So we get to we get to the visit and it goes literally exactly how I say, right? And Greg doesn't, Renae knows Greg, and Greg doesn't get upset. Like Greg just, he's just this calm person, right? And I remember him, it was like it was truly a 15-minute visit because the doctor goes, yeah, you still have cirrhosis of the liver, but you're okay now. You're okay. You're going to live with this and you're going to be fine. And Greg wouldn't leave the office. Like he just kept sitting there and he's like, Dr. Kareem, that's it. Like we've been through this for 18 months and that's it. We're done. Dr. Kareem's like, yeah, she's better. Maybe come back next year to see me just to, follow up. He's like, next year, right? So, he's walking out of the office and he's mad, right? Because none of this makes sense to him, right? And he's like, that's it? This is it? We're done? And I go, we're done. I don't have to come back here. And then the funny part of the even funnier part of all of this is it kept happening. Like I would just say things and they would happen, right? I remember we're sitting in a restaurant one time and he, I looked at him and I said, I have to get a new gastro doctor, a local doctor. And I said, I know who I want to see. And I say the person's name out loud to my husband. And all of a sudden, the waitress comes over and she goes, oh, I overheard you. You need to see him. He's my cousin. Here's my name. She writes down my name and number. She goes, you call him, you tell him that you met me and that he should take you. And I go, oh, okay, because that's how life worked for me at that point, right? Greg slams his fork down and he goes, what the hell is this? She's like, everything you say, just now it comes true. It just comes true. Like, how is this possible? Right. So, and I go, well, that's just how things work now. I just ask and I receive, right? And I got into the doctor. I said, this is who I know. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll accept you as a new patient, right? And it just went as exactly how. And that just kept happening, right? And I still have lots of that still happens, right? Ah, all right. Let's see here. Okay. So, oh, I got to share screen. Hold on. It's the PowerPoint. Sorry about that.
While you're doing that, I just want to say, I love those stories. I love that kind of stuff. And to recognize how you've changed really the reality of what is. So you're saying these things and you've been so positive for so long. Look at how awesome it's now manifesting like this. Look at
Yeah, it is. It is. I had a work colleague, because of course then I went back to work afterwards, and I remember we were out of town for a training, and I said to her, I said, like, all these things were going to happen for us, like these countries were going to contact us to come and train there, and that happened, right? And of course I'm just like, oh yeah, that's what happens now. And I remember she sat me down in the restaurant and she goes, we need to have a talk. And I said, what's wrong? And she goes, everything you say comes true. And I said, I don't know how to explain it to you. Because you're weird then, right? You are weird, right? So now you're going to tell somebody you meditate and you talk to the universe and you talk to beings. And I don't know. I don't even know who I talk to, Renae. Like, I still don't understand all of that. But, and I go, well, that's how it's going to be from now on. And it's really has happened, right? And some levels that she has embraced that concept of like, I'm going to manifest too. And so there's a lot of manifesting that goes on in our work. Okay, so how have I maintained high vibration? So, not knowing what I did, right? So I went to a Dr. Joe Dispenza week-long retreat. And I just want to, say a little bit about my story there is that when I walked into the retreat, and it was local at that point, there was a 7-day retreat in Buffalo. I walked in, sat down, and, many people at these retreats have very serious illnesses. And I sat down between two women. We connected immediately. And, they're telling their story. And so I'm just sitting there and I just casually tell my story. And they both just sat back and they're like, you did the work before even experiencing what Dr. Joe is teaching. And I go, well, I don't really know what's going to happen at the 7 days. Somebody told me to come, like I'm just not that person that researches. And I'm like, well, somebody tells me to come, I'm going to come. And they're like, you have to go give a testimony. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to give a testimony. They're like, do you understand what you did? Right. I was like, well, I guess. Right. So I had to go give a testimony. Now it's on the website, blah, blah, blah. Right. So, but I think when you're at that level, it's just like, yeah, I did it. Okay. Right. And I remember saying to my yoga instructor at the time, like, I feel scared. And he's like, why? I go, because you realize you have powers. You realize you have powers to do things. You realize you can really manifest what you want every day. And, he's like, why are you scared of that? I go, because it's scary, right? Like you actually can make this stuff happen, right? So these are other things that I've done. I've just put them here, so people can have references, but there's many, many amazing things out there. And for those that are local, I think I put, these are just, well, Bill Kell is not local, but Renae introduced me to Bill Kell on the Pigs That Fly. I heard him and I've had several sessions with him. He's just an amazing man. But Mary Beth is local and Carla, my acupuncturist, is local. And they're, just definitely people who have been on a healing journey with me and continue to keep me in that high vibration. And so, of course, Renae. but I don't need to put Renee's information on there. So that is my story.
So on the local people though, do they do things that I think they do. Do they do things where somebody can contact them and do it, whatever, like distantly? Like it doesn't matter if they're local or not, right?
I don't think Carla does. But Mary Beth does. And Bill Cal does, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
definitely.
that.
So I just put Carla in there because she's an alchemist as well. She does a lot of herbs, the different things, but she's an amazing person. So
Awesome, awesome. What I love about your story, Annie, is when you were, and this is, I think, a concept that people have to really recognize how powerful our energy is connected to the earth. Like when you were going, like, kayaking and biking and just being outside, how you were gathering that beautiful energy from Mother and Father Earth as well, which really has a huge healing property for us because it really starts to awaken up things within. And I'm sure you felt it because you're a very outdoorsy person.
yeah. People told me to go hug trees, so I hug trees. I'd go out in my backyard. Our neighbors are like, "Oh, there's that wacko again, hugging the trees," right? I'd be, because somebody told me to do it. I was like, "All right, I'll hug a tree," right? Walk grounding. People told me to walk barefoot. I walked barefoot. Yeah, I think nature, to me, that's what really keeps me grounded, is nature. Almost on a daily basis, I try to do things outside, even when it's very cold here in Buffalo. So.
Exactly, which is absolutely awesome. And what I want to sort of point out to people, and Annie, I don't know if you did this. Did you ever go back and look at things that somebody might have said to you, or somebody might have told you? I know you were doing things like that, once you were sick and whatever. And I'm asking this sort of because I remember going to Annie's house and I didn't know why. I had one of the Dr. Joe Dispenza books. And before I went, they said, bring her this book. And I was like, I think it's highlighted and it's whatever. And I'm like, okay. And I brought her the book. I don't think and I said to her, this is going to really help you. And I remembered thinking, she could care less. Like she doesn't give a shit. Book. And I'm like, are you sure? And I'm talking to them like, are you sure I'm supposed to leave this for her? And they're like, absolutely. I'm like, okay, it's your book.
Yeah.
And what was it, like months later?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Actually, it was, somebody from the yoga community came over and he goes, you need to read Dr. Joe Dispenza's book. And I go, hold on. And I go to the den and I go, oh, Renae gave me this book. Is this the person I'm supposed to read? Like, again, the messages, it's like somebody takes a hammer and hits you and goes, you should do this. And you just go, oh, I'm not going to listen to you right now. Right.
Yeah. Well, because you're not, like you said, you're not in the place at that moment. But then the next message comes, and it's really paying attention to that next message of, okay, now he came in, you were in that space of saying, okay, I can, this is sort of ringing a bell to me. Let me go see, and do that.
And I think, Renae, if I look back at my life, like the world runs at a fast pace, right? We're always running, we're always doing, and it's not taking the moments to just listen. And so I think if I look back at the last 25 years, like I just didn't listen, chose not to stop and just hear what messages were being given, right? And so, I think that's an important piece. Like I just keep trying to, I don't want to say slow down my life because I'm not a slow person, but just listen, right? And so if I hear a message, maybe I don't push it aside anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, when I run at a fast pace and don't listen, I've gotten other medical things. And it's like, and now I go, oh, I'm not listening again. I don't go, oh my God, another medical. I just go, I'm not listening again. Right. And they, another weird occurrence, but a psychic ended up sleeping at my house. That's too long of a story that I didn't even know she was a psychic, but somebody had to stay at my house from one of my trainings. She's a social worker and she came in and, she goes, just so you know, I just came out as a psychic. And I keep getting these readings about you. And I'm like, how is this? Again, another, like, here's the hammer, like, Annie, you're going to listen. And she says to me, not knowing me, truly didn't know me other than as a professional. And she said, the message is you're going to keep getting sick. if you don't learn what you need to do next in life. Right. And I was like, oh my God. Like, and I go, you know what I said to her? I go, tell them to shut up and stop making me sick. And she goes, yeah, they said they're not going to until you listen. And I was like, oh my God, right? So it's again, moments, and I can laugh about it, right? But, at the time, it's not funny because I was in pain again and something was going on. But,
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute and ask the question or comments, whatever it is. Please feel free to do that. Tracy, did you have something to say?
I did. I wanted to jump on the noticing all the signs and the messages that what I think I started doing, and it's so beneficial and powerful, is to actually claim it as a miracle. Like not only to notice it, but to claim it. And I'm talking about the smallest things, the flower outside blooms, and isn't that miraculous? And a cute little puppy, whatever. And and it would just be days that I would notice like life is so amazing. So many miracles. And all of a sudden, it's that energy follows energy, and your life becomes miraculous. And then you get more messages and more signs. And, I'll admit, do you stay in that place? Usually not if are a human in this life. But I love to hear as well the stories about the signs. I call them drop-in angels, the divine intervention, and to not discount it or to downplay it, to upplay it. Like that was so miraculous. That was definitely a drop-in angel. So I really love that you touched on that, and I think it's so powerful, and fun. That's that infusion of fun. And I'm just going to say, we're speaking of illness, but any challenge in life, any looping patterns, like every bit of information you gave is so impactful. Even if you have an illness, but you're also having financial problems or relationship problems, um, every single thing you said, you could apply to any challenge. So
very true. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that because I think that is important. So for me, the messages get given through medical, but for other people, could be through relationships or finances or, other things. So yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Hi, Paige.
I do have a question. Hi, Annie.
Hi, Paige.
Your story, although I've heard it several times, today it just blew me away, and I'm just vibrating so high right now.
Yes.
My question is for both you and Renae. When you heard the message, Renae, about they say that you have lessons to learn. There are different schools of belief about that. For instance, like Abraham, Esther Hicks will say there are no lessons. We're not. This isn't a. And but I also feel through my life that things have been lessons. So I just wondered your thoughts about that.
Go ahead, Annie. You want to take it first?
Oh, I just don't know what you taught me.
I think changed, I'll tell you that, but go ahead.
I think it, I don't do a lot of reading and I don't do a lot of searching of information. And so it's really how I live is how things vibrate. So if somebody says to me, maybe the illness is a message, if it really doesn't click for me, I won't accept it. I won't take it. So, and I think just that I really had to come to that understanding. I believe people have said that 2,000 times to me, and I really just didn't listen. And I think one day I was just like, but what if I do change my thoughts and feelings about this particular matter? Will things start to shift for me? Right. So that's where I come from. I don't come from reading, I know Abraham Hicks, I know something about it, but I don't really read about any of that. And I find that sometimes it's not that it's not helpful to me. It's like I just have my own thoughts about something and I just go with it. So anyways, Renae, I'll turn it over to you.
That's perfect. I really come from a point of, to me, we're just here for experiences. That's it. But if I get a message that the wording for that person is lesson, that's what I use. So I think it just, page 4, for me, I'm always, okay, it's just like everything is just up. That's what I'm here to experience. Okay, there it is, what it is. But many times I will get wording that I wouldn't use for me, or that, I wouldn't describe something. And for Annie, the way that at that time in her life was, they were saying these are lessons that she has to do. She has to learn to slow down. She has to learn to, stop putting everybody else first, all those things. So I think it's just a matter of we're saying the same thing, just using different wording.
Mm. Mm.
So, for if you're Paige, you're doing that, like, what, I'm just here to experience these things, do it. And if all of a sudden you're hearing, well, this is a lesson, maybe it really is something that's coming forward from another aspect of you that says, oh, I need to learn lessons, because we got so many pieces and parts inside. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I love your background, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And one of my lessons really was learning not to be angry about particular things, particular people, right? That's a big lesson, is just, people who you perceive hurt you or have hurt you, right? And holding on to that. And if I really am 100% honest, that was the lesson back then, that, it's just, people are on a journey, right? They're on a journey themselves, and maybe they're just going at a different pace than I am. And so you have to accept where people are at. But, it very rarely has something to do with me, why people act the way they do, right? And, that's just a big lesson to learn. I'm not causing this, but I also can make the choice not to be around people that are not in high vibration. And that's been a big thing for me, in an Italian family, you don't, at least in my Italian family, you don't cut people off. That's just, my mother was never of that belief. And she's like, you forgive, you connect, you stay. And I really bought into that. And then one day I was like, I don't really have to do this, do I? I don't have to be mean about it. I don't have to be, I don't have to make announcements that I want nothing to do with you. I just don't have to be around you, because it does lower my vibration. It really does. And I've accepted my sensitivity around that, and that's okay. Yeah.
I love that. And you're right. It's so difficult, especially with family. There's
Yes.
so many people, like when I used to have people one-on-one, there were so many that said, well, I can't just come up there to my family.
Yeah.
And, and I'm of the thing of like, okay, if I know that this particular person in my family that, I see on occasion or whatever, or they're inviting me to things, I'm not going, because I'm not going to step myself into that vibration and
Yeah.
pull down, because it really does, from an energetic point. When I see that from energy, you literally see these like hooks into you and like pulling you down. And it's
Yeah.
like, why would I continually have to cleanse and clear myself? It doesn't make sense. And if you continually put yourself in there, you're not making room for the high vibrational people.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. It's just making room for that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's amazing. But Annie, let me go back to, because I think sometimes people don't see the signs. If you remember the signs, I know we talked about the sickness and you had it before you actually really was like, oh my God, I am so sick, I can't work, I can't do whatever. What were, if you know that, like some signs that were things that you just sort of ignored to tell you that, hey, you're going downhill here, and I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to be my robot self and keep going. Do you have any of those memories?
I know that they're there, but nothing like really that I can say, I mean, I think a lot of it, I reached out to you and other healers. So I think if I really say, I mean, you were all giving me messages that I just chose not to really do anything about in the beginning. I knew you from when I went to Japan, when I lived in another country, right? Like, and I remember I'd get off these calls with you, and again, feeling great, but not really doing what you suggested I do, or maybe, said, try this, try that. And I just kept thinking, Renae, if I just keep seeing Renae, she's going to do it, right? So I think those messages from other people were just big messages, right? Because I connected to you, I found other people, and I just didn't listen, right? I think that's, again, that mentality that I don't have to do anything different. You're just going to heal me, right? You know, there's a little bit of, I don't know if I should say, like, almost like a quality of just like I'm okay. I'm not doing anything wrong. You just got to heal me, right? Like, you know, and again, I don't want to give that message that when you're sick, you did something wrong, but it's a message that I could be doing other things. So,
Well, isn't that society though?
yeah.
You know, we're sick and we're told, you know, growing up, go to the doctors. They have the answer. So we're, you know, sort of taught that. And now it's a matter of getting out of that, whatever, memory, vibration, whatever, that no, we have it within us. And the more you're doing, and I will say on meditations, it's not just mine, because when you were talking about the meditations, I know that mine have always been, when I channel them, they always say, you know, recommend to people to play it when they go to bed, because it can, you know, work all night long and it'll be great. But when you were talking about it, I did ask, I'm like, what about all the other meditations people do? And they said, all meditations, your system is still awake and doing things when they're sleeping. Like, you know, on different aspects, you're out there, you know, doing what you're doing, but this body is taking it all in and it is making changes. So if you're doing meditations and you're like, you know what, I can't meditate, I'm not a meditator. Do it when you go to bed. Put it on, you know, get quiet. And actually, a lot of them, they're saying you can put it on mute and your system's still getting it, because it's the energy to it. It's got nothing really to do with the words. It's the energy. The words are for our human physical form. I
can definitely understand that. Definitely. Because I mean, I put on your stuff and sometimes I don't even hear what you're saying, but I've already connected to you, you know, in that vibration, you know. And then, you know, oddly, sometimes you would text me the next day and I was like, how did you know that I played your, you know, right? Like, you know, there's a lot of those synchronicity moments. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody have any questions, any comments, anything? Anything anybody else to share? Everybody's good. I know some people had dropped off. They had to go. They had said that. I got some texts that they had gone. I just want to check the chat real fast, make sure there's no questions. I love Annie's stories. Anne said she had to go, but she said, I love it. I love it. Annie's stories and totally relate to her in so many ways. It sounds so much like my journey. Thank you for bringing light to my journey.
Oh, nice.
Nice. Yeah. I should have put my readers on to read. That would have been better.
Can I just share a few more? I was kind of taking notes, Annie, when you're talking, a couple of the things that I love, just to put a, you know, bullet point exclamation on them. One of the things I love that you expressed, kind of you said, whatever anyone did, I tried. And I really took that as you saying, I'm all in, like I'm all in, not necessarily that this is going to be the thing that heals me, but I'm going to do it all because that's how committed I am. I'm that convicted. So I loved your, that was your, you know, kind of your come from your energetic expression. And kind of to, I'm watching people, and this is going to sound extreme, but I almost consider people lucky when the doctors don't have answers, because then you are forced to, you know, and I've had some tests run in the past, and, you know, they always say I'm a medical enigma, like everything's negative, which is awesome because then you do go within and you do start having conversations with your body. And then, and I'm only reiterating what you had said, maybe in a different way. And then you choose what you want that reality to look like. You had mentioned, do you want to be going to doctors and having tests? No, I would rather be going to yoga and doing juices.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome. And it's amazing that you, in a way, you chose your reality. Now, maybe a doctor saying I can't help you was the, you know, the catalyst that got you down that path. But
yeah.
still
Another divine intervention. Somebody saying I can't, it's true though. You think about it, right? You know?
Yeah. And then just the whole lesson piece, how I've been trying to reframe it is, you know, awarenesses and they propel us. There are, our change agents, which again, you can view it either way. Like I always say, oh my God, why did I get in the head with another 2x4 of, oh, thanks for the smack in the head. I'm paying attention now. So I think you really brought up so many amazing points that again can extrapolate out to any topic. Just being more vibrant, more us, more alive. So
Well,
thank you.
and I want to add something to this because so three women when I was healed, three women were referred to me, meaning they had the exact same symptoms as me. They were all in my age range. They all had their liver failing, and they weren't people that drank. Okay. And I'm like, oh my gosh, something's going around, right? We all have a virus or something, right? And all three women, I spoke on the phone. I offered to meet with them, offer to meditate. And at the end of the conversation, after I told them things I did, they all three said, I'll just follow my doctor's advice. So the sad part of that story is they all died. Okay. And I know I had a conversation with you, Renae, about it because I just was like, well, wait a minute. I just shared my story. Shouldn't they do it? But here's the moment again, right? People have hit me with the 2x4 and I didn't listen, right? Like that's their choice. That's their journey. And I have to accept where they are at on their journey, right? And so, and I've learned now that when I tell people my story, if they say that's so nice, I just stop, right? They'll remember my story forever. But they're not in that place to maybe take the next step or journey, part of their journey. And that's okay. That really is. We're all here to live the life that we manifest, that we choose to do. And so may not be my path.
That's so true. And it's so difficult. It's so difficult to do that, there's so many, people that, are healers or whatever you want to call them, that it's so difficult to be working with somebody and to see them going down a path and you're like, oh my God, I was supposed to be helping them. I'm not, but you are helping them. It's a matter of their journey. Exactly what you said in the very beginning. It's about going within. But the healer or whatever has to stay disengaged, disconnected, and just provide that energy or the messages or whatever it is, and let that person take their own journey and step back and say, okay, that's perfect for them. And with that, I sort of want to go back a little bit when I asked, did you see any signs before you got so sick? What I really love is that you can't remember anything. So that says your system has really moved beyond that. And it's like,
Yeah.
you know what? Nope, we're not even bringing this back in. Like, I can't remember, I don't have it. So that's awesome. Like, I love that. And you had always, just because I want to sort of clarify this, because I don't want people to think, oh, okay, she changed to eating her habits. You always ate healthy. Am I correct?
Well, that's, it's funny because many of my friends said, you were the person that shouldn't have got sick, because I used to have healthy eating parties and you had to bring a recipe of a healthy item, like, because people don't know what quinoa is or lentils or tofu or whatever. And so people would have to bring a dish and make something. So, people knew me as that I'm always encouraging healthy eating. So absolutely. Absolutely. So,
I think that
it's about embracing the food and the pills and all of that is to go into your body and give you health, but it really is much more than that. It is really much more than that.
Yeah. I love that. And you hear so many times where you're like, oh my God, that person was, the epitome of health. How did they, get this or that? Well, it can happen to anybody. And it's really paying attention and taking the time, to me, taking the time daily. Like you said, if it was 20 minutes doing the Qigong, or 5 minutes doing a meditation when you go to sleep, saying, reframing, the things, doing the conscious reframes for anything. All of that stuff makes a difference.
And I want to add to that, and I really should have put this in my PowerPoint, because many people said to me, you need to cut off the Western meds. Like, don't go to the doctor, don't take their medicine. And I was like, ooh, it didn't resonate with me. And again, this is who I am. Like, and I was like, I can't do that. And I was like, but okay, I get it. Like, there's many of these drugs have toxicity in them, right? And I said, but if I accept that drug with love and ask that drug, the doctor lovingly gave it to me. Dr. Kareem gave me food packs and gave me other things, lovingly gave it to me. My body's going to lovingly accept it, and it's going to help me get healthy. And I think that's just my belief. And I know many people believe you should never go to a Western doctor. And that's just not how I think. I think both is great. And I think helping to bridge, balance, bridge, all of that, I think it's important to do. Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. Because I've always said there's always that perfect union between the two. That some people are either one way or the other. And okay, I guess, that's their path. But I think eventually, and I feel like that's starting to shift because I'm hearing more and more people say that their doctor is saying weird things, which is fun. It's like, what is the weird thing? So that he's there to help me get healthy, or that, he's doing this work of God, or like, okay, if that's weird, all right, great. But I really think that that's starting to come together. But I think it's because we're making change. Just like you made that change, you would walk in, I'm here for my facial. I'm here. You're changing their energy, their vibration, and everything that they're giving you, exactly what you said, having it in love and putting this in is, to me, so many cases, just a beautiful mirror.
And I made a decision this year that, I have openly in the last two visits with doctors, I have said, you've never asked me why I got better. I finally put it out there. I was scared to do it. I don't want people, doctors. And I said, you're going to listen for 1 minute, right? And, both doctors were very receptive. My surgeon, I had a hernia surgery, and, my surgeon said, do you know that the top 10 Forbes companies all say that they meditate as a group, like the administration meditates. That's one of the reasons they feel they're successful. And so, and then my other doctor said, you know a lot about this. I guess my other patients should learn about it. So I've actually drafted a letter. I spent a lot of time on it, and my decision is that I'm going to mail it next week. So what are they going to do? They're going to read it. I gave them some resources, and they'll do what they want with it. Maybe again, it's their journey, right? You get something in the mail from one of, and they love me, right? They know who I am. They know that I do a lot of healthy things. And so they're going to read it, and maybe they'll take a moment and say, oh, okay, maybe we should consider this, right? So,
Exactly.
moments of impact in their journey. So
exactly.
We got a heart from Susan.
Yes. And actually, and I'm gonna give you, wait a minute. I gotta remember how to do that. I'm gonna give you these.
Oh, thank you.
I have to remember how to do them.
Never,
Oh, you're right. Anybody else? Any comments? Anything? Annie, I can't thank you enough for this, and I'm sure this is going to reach a lot of people that need to hear it, and they'll take their journey on it. But this is such a phenomenal story, and you've done so much, and I'm so glad you're still here with us in life.
Wouldn't let me go. You could have said, I'll bring it to the light. Like, could have went on. I'm hearing it's pretty good over there wherever I'm going. So
exactly. Nope, you got, well, because I'm sure you had to also go through that to help people understand. Go ahead, Paige.
Yeah,
I just want to say, Annie, you have no idea how many people that you have impacted, because you also have a testimonial on Dr. Joe's website or YouTube channel. And I know I personally have sent it to so many people. So this interview, I hope, goes far and wide, because it's so much more in depth, and there's so much power in what you've done. So I just want to thank you for sharing this story again, and even more in depth, and how many, you have no idea the ripple that you've created in this world.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you. And I believe in I'm going to say this nicely, but I'm not too woo-woo, right? Like I'm not I don't even read about all this stuff. Like, people say the Palladians. I'm like, what is that? I don't know. I don't even know what these things mean, and I hope that that does reach people, because I think, sometimes I've heard talks and I'm like, I don't even know what these people are talking about. Like, right? Like, but it's really about, what are you noticing inside? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? Can you stop and just do that? And we all can do that. Yeah, we definitely all. So thank you, Paige. I appreciate that. Thank you, Renae, for
Yes,
hosting
thank
me.
you. Yeah. And thank you, Paige, for saying that. Because as you were saying that, I was getting my chills. Because I was like, not only the story, Paige is right. Like through your whole life, you've touched so many people with just everything that you do. And you've made such a huge difference. So thank you. Any ending or anything you want to tell people that you haven't already to end this?
Oh, I would say who I am really as a trainer in my professional work is that you get off this recording or call, and you make a decision to do two things that I recommended. And they could be what I recommended or a version of that, right? I always say to people, create yourself. You don't have to do what I do, but you could take and create and do something that works for you. So, because it's kind of like the book on the shelf. I read a book and I could go, that was a really nice book. It's a self-help book. It's great. And then I don't do anything, right? But can I make a choice to do two things that are different, right? And then, if you fall off from doing those two things, you get back on, right? So I think to me, that's what's that's how I live. If I fall off from Qigong, there was months that went by and I said, okay, then just get up and go back and start it again. And I'm like, wow, I feel good. Right. So, yeah. So that's really my ending, is just take step forwards. Even if you fall back, take step forwards.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you everybody for being here and all that are listening. Have an awesome time creating your day, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.